Is the American dream slipping away? For adults in their 30s today,
Unpack trends, pressures, and surprising shifts.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a concept that's, well, pretty central to the American story, the American dream. For many generations, that vision, it conjured images of owning a home, starting a family, maybe achieving a life more prosperous than your parents. It's been this really powerful guiding star. But here's the central question we're diving into. For adults in their 30s right now, is that dream actually slipping away? Or maybe is it simply changing shape, adapting to a new world? So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack the incredible sources you provided. We're talking detailed research reports, raw census data, some really revealing surveys. We're going to explore the trends, the economic pressures, and honestly some truly surprising cultural shifts that seem to be reshaping what success even means. Our goal, like always, is to cut through all the noise, deliver the most important insights, and basically give you a shortcut to being well-informed on this vital topic.
And we really do have quite a robust collection of material here. We're looking at comprehensive research reports, a deep look into census data, and recent surveys that offer a pretty robust, almost 360-degree view of the landscape for 30-somethings today. And our mission, as you said, isn't just about revealing what is happening, which is interesting in itself, but crucially, why it matters, and what these shifts might suggest about the future of a concept so deeply ingrained in the American identity. We're going to connect quite a few dots for you.
Okay, let's unpack this then.
Yeah.
Maybe we should start with what has traditionally been like the absolute cornerstone of the American dream, homeownership. The data in these reports, it reveals a pretty stark generational contrast. I mean, consider this. By age 30, only about a third, just 33% of millennials owned a home.
Just 30%, yeah.
Now, compare that to prior generations at the exact same age. 42% of Gen X, 48% of baby boomers, and get this, a significant 55% of the silent generation.
Wow.
So, I mean, this shows a steady, pretty undeniable decline in early adult homeownership across these cohorts.
And what's really fascinating here is that even as millennials have now moved into their late 30s, they are still lagging significantly behind. As of 2024, the sources say only about 47% of millennials own a home. Now, that's still way below the roughly 65% of Gen X who are homeowners at that same point in their lives.
So it's not just a delayed start, it's a persistent gap.
Exactly. This isn't just some statistical blip. It feels like a profound cultural shift. It's forcing a reevaluation of what making it in America truly means, maybe beyond just brick and mortar. The struggle for this generation to attain what was once a fairly common milestone is clearly prolonged. It's taking much longer.
And it really highlights the lasting impact of major economic events, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Our research points out that young adults were hit particularly hard by the Great Recession's aftermath. Homeownership rates for people under 35 dropped significantly by a full 7 percentage points between 2006 and 2017.
7 points, that's substantial.
It is. And while there has been a bit of a recent rebound, the sources stress it's still not back to pre-2000s levels for that age group. So yeah, maybe things are improving slightly for some, but the ground they're starting from is just much lower.
And here's something else interesting. It isn't just about income, though obviously income is a huge part of the story. The reports reveal this intriguing paradox related to education. Even college-educated millennials by age 30 only saw about 38% homeownership.
38%, even with a degree.
Right. Now compare that to college-educated boomers, where 54% owned a home at that same age. It sort of fundamentally redefines that traditional earn a degree, secure the dream pathway, doesn't it? It suggests that even with similar or maybe even higher initial earnings for young college graduates today, compared to earlier generations, higher education just isn't the golden ticket it once was for these kinds of foundational milestones.
Okay, so if homeownership is, let's say, a shifting foundation, what about that other traditional pillar, starting a family? What do the numbers show there?
Well, what's fascinating here is this clear trend toward delayed parenthood. And in some cases, a rising share of, childlessness, particularly in the 30s. If you look back to the late 1970s, only around 15% of women aged 30 to 34 had not yet given birth.
Okay, 15%.
Now, fast forward to 2022, and that figure has just skyrocketed to nearly 38 to 40%.
Whoa, wait, almost 40%? That's nearly 2 in 5 women in their early 30s today without children.
Exactly. It's a radical change in just a few decades.
Wow, that's a huge jump. Does that mean, like, fewer children overall are being born in this generation, or is it just later?
It's mostly later, not necessarily fewer children overall, but a really significant shift in the timing. 40 to 44 were mothers. That's actually a slight increase from 80% back in 2006.
Oh, interesting. So the lifetime likelihood hasn't collapsed.
Right. What's changed dramatically is when it happens. The median age at first birth for U.S. women is now definitely improved contraception and, frankly, just evolving social norms around when you should start a family.
So it really feels like these trends, homeownership delays, later parenthood, they aren't just millions of individual choices happening in a vacuum, are they? What do the sources indicate about the bigger economic and societal forces that might be pushing these shifts?
Oh, absolutely not in a vacuum. If we connect this to the bigger picture, there's like a whole constellation of factors underlying these shifts. Let's start with income. The reports highlight a significant issue: stagnant incomes, coupled with growing inequality. You have to remember, many millennials started their careers right around the Great Recession.
Yeah, tough time.
Really tough job market, slower wage growth. And for workers without a college degree, the median millennial at age 30 earned 23% less than the median income advantage over boomers at the same age. So this flat or even declining early career income, it just makes it incredibly hard to save for things like down payments or feel secure enough to support a family. It directly feeds into delaying both home buying and childbearing.
And, okay, given those income challenges, what do the sources tell us about that other massive hurdle, housing costs?
Yeah, housing costs. They've just completely outpaced income growth. I mean, especially in desirable urban areas where many jobs are. High rents make saving for a down payment this incredibly steep uphill battle. For many, it feels almost impossible. The research puts it pretty bluntly. For many millennials, the American dream is just no longer synonymous with homeownership. It's simply not attainable in the same way it once was.
Right. And this brings up an important point.
Yeah.
What about education? That used to be seen as the surefire path to, getting ahead, upward mobility.
Well, it's complicated. While this generation is the most educated in U.S. history, they're also, by far, the most indebted. College costs has just exploded. We're talking tuition, fees, room and board, more than doubled from around $12,000 per year back in 1981 to nearly $25,000 in 2024, adjusted for inflation.
Doubled. Okay.
As a result, you've got over 42 million Americans collectively owing, wait for it, a staggering $1.7 trillion in student loans.
1.7 trillion. That number is just, it's hard to even comprehend. You hear figures like that, and you really wonder how anyone can start building a life with that hanging over them. And it clearly has a direct impact on those life milestones we've been talking about.
It absolutely does. The surveys show about half of millennials report having
The
delayed.
general cost of living has climbed across the board, too. Healthcare, childcare, even groceries seem more expensive.
Precisely. And the reports really highlight childcare. They mention that childcare expenses can actually rival a second mortgage payment.
A second mortgage. That's a staggering thought.
It is. It's like buying two homes but only living in one. It just squeezes budgets. The inflation surge. It's only added to the uncertainty. It seems to put 30-somethings on a much more precarious footing than their parents were on. It's truly striking when you look at the data, and changing family norms are deeply intertwined with these economic realities. The median age of marriage now, it's around 28 to 30. That's roughly 5 to 7 years later than it was back in 1970.
5 to 7 years later.
Yep. And part of that is economic people often wait until they feel more financially secure before tying the knot. But it's also cultural. More individuals are prioritizing finishing their education, establishing careers, focusing on personal growth in their 20s. Plus, let's be honest, there's just less social stigma today attached to being single or child-free in your 30s. It offers people more flexibility. So, yeah, the traditional life script has genuinely changed.
And the research really seems to emphasize that the Great Recession was this pivotal event. It hit millennials particularly hard, leading to what some sources describe as a lost decade of wealth building. Can you maybe elaborate on that specific impact?
That's a really important point the sources make. Yeah, the Great Recession hit right as many millennials were entering the workforce or in their early careers. Jobs were scarce, incomes were depressed. Many ended up taking refuge in affordable rentals or, living with parents longer than previous generations might have. And at the same time, the housing market itself went through this structural shift. Developers started building more luxury apartments, fewer affordable starter homes.
Right. Fewer options at the entry level.
Exactly. So even as the economy slowly recovered, young adults found fewer affordable home buying options available to them. And then, just as things maybe started looking up for some, boom, the COVID-19 pandemic hits. That caused what demographers call a baby bust, a noticeable dip in birth rates, and also ignited this frenzied housing market that again drove prices to record highs, making it incredibly difficult for first-time buyers.
So it's like wave after wave of economic challenge.
Pretty much. Economic cycles and these underlying structural costs have just repeatedly created a more challenging environment for 30-somethings compared to what previous generations experienced.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Given all these trends, all these pressures, is the American dream actually dead? Or is it just different? The surveys we looked at share some real skepticism on this. Apparently, only about half of Americans today believe the American dream is still attainable. And younger adults. We're the most skeptical.
Now, don't get me wrong, homeownership certainly remains an aspiration. Yeah. In one 2018 study, it was still the top life goal for both millennials and Gen X, actually even more so than for boomers in that particular study. But younger generations seem to be placing relatively greater emphasis on more intangible goals, things like personal fulfillment.
Okay, so it's not just about the house and the 2 kids anymore. What other kinds of elements are emerging as like core parts of this possibly redefined dream?
Precisely. The sources give some specific examples which are quite telling. Nearly half of millennials, about 47%, said that being able to follow their passion, whether in their career or just life in general, was a key part of their American dream.
Almost half. Okay.
Compare that to only around 28% of boomers who felt the same way about following passion. Work-life balance, flexibility, those are also highly valued. 51% of millennials cited that as core to their idea of success.
So flexibility is key.
Hugely important. It clearly shows the dreams becoming, well, far more individualized. You know, one person's dream might genuinely be to travel the world or start their own business online. Another's might still be that family and house in the suburbs. It's less monolithic.
And it seems like some of these shifts are increasingly intentional choices, right?
Yeah.
Not purely reactions to economic hardship.
Yes, I think that's a crucial distinction the analysis makes. You see the rise of what's termed the rentership society, where some people are actively choosing flexibility and freedom from a mortgage burden. 50 who don't currently have children say they are unlikely to ever have them.
44% likely to remain child-free.
Yeah, and they cite various reasons: career focus, simply not wanting kids, financial concerns, even environmental or social considerations play a role for some. So the whole idea of what a successful, fulfilling life looks like is certainly much more diverse, much more fluid now than that, 1950s American dream archetype we often think of.
Okay, so wrapping this up, is the American dream ending for adults in their 30s? Our deep dive into all these sources suggests that, well, the traditional version of the dream, the house with the picket fence, 2 kids, steady job, all locked in by your 30s, that version has indeed become elusive for many in this generation. That seems undeniable. Homeownership rates for young adults hit historic lows for millennials. Parenthood is happening later. Economic forces, stagnant income, soaring housing and education costs, that crushing student debt, they've truly delayed or even derailed the timeline for achieving those classic milestones. In that sense, yeah, the promise that each generation will easily prosper more than the last, that seems to have faltered.
But I agree. Declaring the American dream dead feels, well, maybe premature or too simplistic. The pathway to achieving elements of the American dream has undeniably gotten longer, maybe more winding, more circuitous. The dream isn't necessarily ending so much as it's being deferred and definitely reimagined. This generation seems to be forging a different kind of journey through adulthood, one that, yes, often postpones homeownership and parenthood, but also places this new, strong emphasis on flexibility, on financial caution perhaps born from experience. Social landscape, 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 social